The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the host, other guests, or any affiliated entities. Each participant is responsible for their own statements and opinions. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Hola, mi hinchada, and welcome back for another edition of High Trust, Low Context. I'm your host, El Chaco, and with me tonight for episode 17, it's the end of the world as we know it, this is my good buddy, Mr. Black. Welcome back to the show.
Good day. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So if in case anybody out there is wondering, where the heck have I been? Well, there's been a few things going on. We had a whole series of power outages for quite a while there, where anytime that I tried to do anything at nighttime, I could never fully know that it was going to work out. So there was that. And then on top of it, I had my mom come to visit us just recently. So we had her for a nice 2 weeks. I got to show her the Chaco compound and got to bring her to Iguazu Falls over on the Brazil side. Are you familiar with Iguazu Falls?
No, I saw a couple pictures you posted, though. That's incredible.
Yeah, man. It was, it's famously Eleanor Roosevelt, when she saw the Iguazu Falls, her first utterance afterwards, she gasped, "Oh, poor Niagara," because it's just that much better. And,
I had to take a second take. I was like, "Are you back?"
Yeah, no, exactly. No, it was great, man. I loved it. That was my third time going there, and it was really cool to bring my kids and my mom, of course. And she was a champion. She's like me, has a bit of a bad knee, and so there's a lot of walking, a lot of kind of downward decline, and a lot of stairs at the end. But she handled it quite well, and it ended up being a real good time. And it was funny because we'd originally intended to have her come in April and to come after Easter, not during Lent. and due to some logistical, error from the caregivers from my dad, she ended up having to come early. And you know what? It worked out just fine. We really had a good time. And it's funny because when we left Canada, we did not know when we would see each other again. And this time around, it was really nice to get to have her here. And we kind of looked at it as it was in God's hands. If he wanted if he wanted her to come here in March, then sure enough, that was when she was going to come. And, I get to joking about it, but it just kind of ties into the theme of the show. At least she got to come here before the end of the world.
That's coming up quick, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently it's right around the corner. I don't know if you've been following this, but there's been a lot of talk about this upcoming eclipse. And I'm used to eclipses. I remember them in my lifetime. I remember when I was a kid, don't look at the sun and all that kind of stuff. I remember the one in 2017, when they famously had Donald Trump and he just like straight up like a Chad, just looked right at
like he was Chuck Norris or something, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he, it was so they got this how the internet is, and how Twitter can be, and how everybody of all denominations can be, but they've been pointing out these things about this eclipse coming up. For example, I have not verified this. I haven't opened up Google Earth or Google Maps or anything like that, but they say that in the 2017 eclipse, it crossed like 7 cities or towns named Salem, which is short for Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And then this time around, they're claiming, and there are these are real cities and towns, but that it's crossing 7 places called Nineveh. And so for anybody who's familiar with Nineveh, that comes from the book of Jonah. And it does make things interesting. It just sure makes things interesting. And apparently, like where the X crosses of it, it's close to that East Palestine where there was that train derailment, and then we got all this wacky stuff going on. So I really wanted to talk about it because it's all over the place. I mean, we've got Russia at war with Ukraine. That's not new. That's been going on for a little while now, and we've got Israel and Palestine going on right now, which is pretty ugly still. It's been going on since October. And speaking of Israel, I kind of mentioned it to you before, but if you're familiar with the red heifer prophecy, and I guess I believe it comes from the book of Numbers, where they had basically lost their connection with God, and the only way to get it back was to offer him a sacrifice of a perfect red heifer, which means one that has not a single white hair on it, and that it has never had a yolk on it. It's never been milked. It's got to be, how they are with these extra rules and all these kind of things that I didn't see that in the Bible, but it's like, now they got to be 3 years old, and it's coming up on that. And apparently like this weekend is when they're going to be sacrificing a red heifer on this. Like I had it in the video there, but there's like a ramp they built that looks at the temple, the Dome of the Rock or whatever. It's like the third most important. It's like the third most important Muslim site in the world, Islamic site in the world. And that's you want a powder keg to go off. That's not going to go so well for anyone. And the World Economic Forum for quite a while has been talking about cyber attacks and shutting down the power grid, and the internet will go away. And it's such a broad topic that we could really go on for hours. But I really wanted to know. So, we were talking a bit before the show. There's kind of like a checklist. There's kind of like a there's kind of like a checklist we're supposed to be watching for at the end of the world. And did you maybe want to cover some of that? Let's kind of go over what that checklist might entail while I light my cigar.
Yeah. So, it's 2017. There's the other eclipse, and I remember these same videos, showing the X that the eclipse would make, or the the symbol, the character that it creates. It looks like an A.
From it's like alpha and omega and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And and during that time, I didn't know what to believe about it. I knew enough about Fatima that there was some suspicion, without going into too much detail, but there's a history of 100 years of time for a warning to the Pope to consecrate Russia.
Oh, right. So 1917 to 2017. So that kind of connected, right?
So some people wondered if that was the 100-year period. There's good evidence to believe. I believe it's 1938. But again, Scripture tells us no one knows the time or the day. Mm-hmm. So we have to be careful about getting, too caught up in the dates and the times and all that stuff. But the checklist I started looking into at that time because, checklist, it's maybe not the right term, but it covers it pretty good. So our Lord in Scripture speaks of, the end times and certain things that we'll see, wars, we'll see famines, we'll see
pestilence and disease
and times worse than those of Noah. That one really struck me because there's I think it's called the Midrash, the Jewish commentary on the Old Testament.
Yep.
And so this is sort of like a companion commentary with the Old Testament written by the ancient Jews, like the Old Testament Jews, not
the 13th century convert Jews.
Yeah, it's not the Talmud. It's different things. Yeah. So in the Midrash, it talks about the times of Noah, and one of the things that got God so angry was the perversion of marriage.
That's right. There were men marrying men at that time.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And calling it that when God gave the command, for Adam and Eve to become one flesh and go forth and multiply. That was one of the first commands, other than don't eat from the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely is key to one of the purposes God had us for, to go forth and multiply. And he put that protection on it. And so that rejection of God's plan, that rejection of our nature, that rejection of our God's image in us, seems to be part of it. And so there's a whole bunch more. I ended up getting some books on, Catholic prophecy. I showed you that one.
Yep. You can
Eve's
show it to the
Response.
camera again. Show it to the camera again
Yeah.
here for
So,
people who are at home
there we
watching.
go. Yeah. Too bright. There we go.
There you go.
So it's a 10 published book, The Coming Chastisement, Catholic Prophecy. So it's light reading, very, very dense.
It's a bedtime story for the kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 3 days of darkness. All right, kid, go to bed. Yeah. So,
do your kids know about the 3 days of darkness, by the way?
We've talked briefly with them. Again, I'm not sure where I stand on it. I'm of the opinion I'd rather be, have what I need and not need it than not have it and need it.
Yeah, we've got, actually, when we were building our house, I took it into consideration. And so we have bedrooms with shutters that completely cover and lock.
Yeah.
And then I've got, okay, so for, let's before we say whether we fully believe in it or not, let's try to describe it for those who might not be familiar with the 3 days of darkness, who's talked about it and what it entails. Could you maybe give us a rundown on that?
Yeah. So there's Blessed Marie Julie Jeheny. I believe she was a stigmatist.
Yeah, out of France.
Yeah, and she was she's credited with prophesying about it, saying that there will be a time when there's 3 days of darkness that envelop the world, that a pestilence like in the air will cover the earth. I forget, in some they describe almost like demons arising out. And
yeah, they're all over the place. It's scaring the crap out of people. You're not to leave the house. You're not to look out the window.
And only
you're also supposed to take care of your animals. So for all the farmers that might be listening to this, you're supposed to do your best to take care of them. So, pull in your pets into the room and do all that kind of stuff. Make sure they're taken care of. It doesn't sound pretty. It sounds pretty awful. But what are we to do besides close the windows and not look outside?
Well, have a blessed beeswax candle, and that apparently will be the only source of light available to those who have them, and pray.
And it won't go out. If you've got one, it won't go out. It's not gonna.
Yeah.
It's not gonna go out. Yeah.
Yeah, and pray, and basically you spend 3 days in penance. Don't open the door. Nothing. So
even if there's scratching or screams, let us in, and all that kind of stuff.
Familiar voices.
Nothing. You let it be.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty horrifying, actually.
It does, and there's some precedent in Scripture with
it's
in
Exodus.
Egypt, the 3 days of darkness. There's also the not looking back, in the pillar of salt in Genesis, and there's different precedents in it. But I also like any prophecy, one prophecy is given, if it's authentic, it's given as conditional,
right?
So
we can avoid it like Nineveh, right? We can avoid it like Nineveh.
Yeah. So
it came up again also in Garabandal. I forget the name of the seer, but so Garabandal is a little tiny town in Spain where there were kids. A lot of times, the Blessed Virgin Mary appears to kids like she did in Fatima, and she did in Garabandal. And in the Garabandal one, she describes the warning. Have you heard about the warning?
Yes, that there would be a sign and also an illumination of conscience.
Illumination of conscience. Yeah. So basically, time itself stops, everything freezes. You basically, I don't know if you come face to face with God, but you come to you are aware of what God wants. And
And the state of your soul.
yeah, exactly. For the way I've had it described to me is that you see yourself, God allows you to see yourself the way he sees you. And you get to basically go over all of the sins of your life and know the gravity of them. And like, from the way I've had it described is that there are sins that you and I both probably do in our lives that we aren't even aware of, that offend God greatly, and we don't even know why or how. And after the warning, we will have that pretty solid. And that the warning is given so that we have that chance afterwards to repent and to change our ways. And I think it's Father Paul Kramer talked about, there was an Italian stigmatist. So a stigmatist, to anybody who's unfamiliar, is somebody who experiences the stigmata. Sometimes it's visual and physical, like a hole or blood in the hands and the feet and then in the side. Sometimes it's where they feel it, but it doesn't show. But this Italian stigmatist apparently prophesied, and this is in the 80s, I think, in the 80s. But he prophesied that there would be, because he was talking about the next popes. And I know there's a lot of people out there that lock in on like the alleged prophecy of Saint Malachi, and and basically talking about like the succession of popes to the end, and that there would be a short-lived pope. There was only going to be 3 more popes, and then there would be an anti-pope. And it kind of times out with the current pope that we have right now. But I can't declare him an anti-pope. Neither can you, or neither can anybody in the audience. It has to be a future pope that does so. But that basically there was going to be some sort of cataclysmic event. It could be the warning. It could be the 3 days of darkness. But basically what he foresaw was that there would be lineups around the blocks for confession after everybody's got an idea of this. I don't know. Like, I mean, again, God works in his ways, and sometimes he needs to instill this massive chastisement for us to change. And he's had to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And so any of these kind of, not just Catholic prophecies, I'm talking about like every other prophecy, like, Protestant prophecies, secular prophecies, pagan prophecies, Jewish prophecies, they're all out there. Every group's got them. But the thing is that I don't know, with my wife and I, when we talk about it, we always think about it in terms of like, they all sound like they're harsh and they suck and they're not fun and you don't really want to go through them. But there's always kind of this happy ending afterwards. And I think I wanted to talk about that as well. Yeah. In that, well, for example, going back to Garabandal and the warning, the seer was told flat out that she would give him she would give us a heads up. Like, she would give through her channels on the internet and stuff, she would give us the heads up. She's still alive, right? So she's still going, and I get the understanding. I sort of got the understanding that it's going to probably happen on a Thursday, and I don't know where I heard that, but it was going to happen on a Thursday, and it would precede the 3 days of darkness. So you'd get the warning, 3 days of darkness, and then begins the kind of the restoration, that period of peace that comes afterwards. And so every time when you hear about it, there's always this like really harsh period that you're going to really not want to be a part of, but that there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel that's worth sticking around for. And I find it really interesting because when it comes to the end of the world stuff, like, I don't know if you've seen this, but in the last little while, okay, you've probably been involved with other people who are seeking, who want to know about stuff. I know I've had long conversations with people that, they just kind of look at the way my family is living and they go, okay, I kind of want what that is. I want that peace, because that's what they see. They don't know how to label it, but really what it comes down to is a peace.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of people in the last 5 years that are converted because they have this inside fear of the end of the world. And what is the end of the world, really? I mean, it's the second coming of Christ. And that second coming of Christ is a very different thing for different people. Because I know for myself, I mean, I try to stay in a state of grace for the most part, to the best of my ability. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, for what I know, I've stayed in a state of grace for years now. But at the same time, you can never be fully 100% sure. So that's why I frequent the sacrament of penance and confession. But you know, the thing is that if Jesus is coming on the clouds from the east, I'm going to be happy about this. I'm going to be ecstatic about this, because it's basically everything you've wanted. You just didn't know it fully until, because I mean, really, what are you retaining onto right now? It's like, oh, okay, you know, like, oh no, I don't want to lose this opportunity to pay off my mortgage. You know, like, oh no, I don't get to find out who wins the Super Bowl. Oh no, like none of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
But we all have a different take on it. I mean, for example, there's a lot of, not all Protestants, but there's a lot of Protestant denominations that believe in the rapture. And so the rapture being that Jesus comes back and he sucks up all the good Christians and leaves all the bad people for hell on earth, basically. And it doesn't really resonate. It doesn't fit with, like, you have to do some mental backflips to make it work in the Bible. That's just, you know, that's my take on it. It's not my own lone take on it. The Catholic Church rejects the idea of the rapture, but we have our own sort of versions of it, I guess, if you really think about it. And to a degree, the 3 days of darkness idea, if it's taken literally, could be seen as a form of that, I guess. Because again, the hard part about the 3 days of darkness is that, like, who's going to know about this? I mean, really, aside from like my Catholic circles and people like yourself, who we're in the know on these, at least we've read up on these things. You know, that you're wiping out like 99% of the population at that point, because most Novus Ordo Catholics don't know about this, and they're not prepared. They certainly don't have beeswax blessed candles on hand in the house. Or you brought up about Mary Julie Jeheni. I've got the is it her, or I've got the purple scapular.
Oh, okay. I believe that's through her. Yes.
Yeah. So
it's one of those things, like, there's two ways to approach it, you know, that I see. One, you know, like we've talked, there's a lot of interesting details, and it's very anyway, it just grabs your curiosity, right? But then there's also this approach where, one, why are there chastisements? Like, why would God allow something like that? Like, you think, even, you know, something that's actually happened, like why did World War I and II happen? Because those are chastisements.
Absolutely.
War is a punishment for sin. But why have a punishment? And the thing is the cure is built into the punishment. And so why does God chastise? It's because it's a mercy. It's a call to the hard-hearted to face their mortality, to face their judgment, and to face the fact that they're not all powerful, to humble them, to humble everyone, humble us into realizing what's actually important. You know, like you were saying, that there's certain things in life that, you know, we put effort into, and they're not maybe bad in themselves, but they're not the be all end all.
Well,
and so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You were saying, like, you know, even just kind of going back through biblical chastisements, you brought up about like Lot, you know, Lot's wife, the pillar of salt. So that was Sodom and Gomorrah. And I mean, it's built right in the name, Sodom. What was angering God at that point in time. And don't get into this whole they were inhospitable crap. That's just not going to work. But you've also got, I mean, going back to Genesis, you have plenty of chastisements there. Plenty. You have well, okay, you've got so you've got Sodom and Gomorrah, you've got Noah, you've got Adam and Eve, you've got going back to Exodus, you've got the 3 days of darkness. There was 3 days of darkness that were given to Pharaoh and the Egyptian people. And, and you talked about hardness of heart, like it didn't take for them. But then even the Jews themselves, right? Like they worshiped a golden calf. And so God chastised them by making them walk in the desert for 40 years. And if you look at it, basically all the people that started that journey, most of them didn't finish, if not any of them. Yep. It was basically the ones that came afterwards. So God had to kind of flush out a whole generation. And you got an avoided one in Nineveh, and the way that they avoided it. So most people know about Jonah and the whale, and they know about, or Jonah and the big fish. I mean, it doesn't specifically say whale. And that he was, and how long was he in there for? 3 days, right? And he came out and he prophesied, and he warned them, and they did their penance, and they did wear sackcloth and ashes, and they did avert the crisis, so to speak. And we were talking about the checklist. So Jesus talks about the checklist. I mean, he says, like, in the end times, you will see war and rumors of war and pestilence and disease and death and famine. And it was around 2017 is when I came back in. And at that time, I was looking at it. I was like, well, we got most of those things, but we did not have famine. And it feels like famine's being forced. It's being worked on right now as we speak, in terms of over the top pressures on farmers. Just today, again, we don't know what's going to happen with this Baltimore bridge thing, but apparently that was a pretty darn important bridge, and it connects the I-95. Most Baltimore people use it for their commute. That port is shut down. That port is shut down for, like, at least, they said it's going to be shut down for months, could be years. That bridge is not going to get built for another 4 or 5 years. That apparently was the biggest port for exporting coal to Europe. So you got that on there as well. It's almost like a Nord Stream, version for the US, because we don't even know how bad that's going to hit the supply chain along the way with what's going to be hit out of that. So it's a little bit dicey. And then in terms of the church, and you brought up about the days of Noah and the Midrash, what do we have in the Catholic Church right now? What's going on in the Catholic Church? What did the Pope basically? He's giving blessings to gay couples now, couples, not individuals, couples. Which is if it's a couple, to coplar, to join together. What do we got there? We're not looking good. This is this. Well, I can understand those end as nigh people. They're getting real. They're hitting it on the nose now, it seems.
And I mean, we have arguably, like, foreshadowing of the abomination of desolation with what happened in that. What was that? St. Patrick's or?
Oh yeah. You had the gay funeral that just happened recently,
and the mother
in the Vatican in 2019. You had the idol of that Amazonian pagan deity, and then and that was put onto the altar in St. Peter's, and over the grave of St. Peter. I believe his relics, his remains are underneath that.
Well, they gave, I think Pope Francis gifted, I don't know if it was all of his relics or some of his relics away. What? So, like, there's all these things that really feel like, there's I think it's in is it Jude, where he talks about the one who stands in the way must be removed.
Oh yeah, so basically the catechon, so
Yeah.
to speak, right? The catechon, and that might have been Benedict in this last.
Yeah, there's different interpretations. Some people say it's the Holy Roman Empire and the fragments of it. Some people say it's the Catholic Church. Some people say it's the Pope. There's different understandings of it, and I guess the important thing is, you know, like, I'll probably, because I've been through this, and I went through a stage of feeling anxious and frightened of everything, and I'm an obsessive researcher in the best times when it comes to this stuff. But when I get really heavy into stuff, you know, it isn't always the best for my spiritual life, in the sense that I'm so focused on these details that I start replacing prayer with that, or replacing you know, my daily duty with that. It's more interesting, it's more tantalizing, it's more exciting.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where we pay attention to signs of the times. Just like, you know, you take a quick peek outside at the weather and then you prepare for your day. And so it's very similar to that sort of relaxed approach to this. We know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
We
Be
know,
prepared.
yes,
Always
be prepared. And
light
the
your
same
lamps.
thing with,
You know, have
with
your
your
oil
death.
in your lamp.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, all this is going on, and I'm not frightened about it. I'm actually I'm at peace, because I've done all that I can. You know, and to anybody listening who knows that I used to live in Canada, they might think that I'm talking out of the side of my mouth here, because I uprooted my family and moved down here based on the signs of the times. But at the same time, like, yeah, okay, I did it and it's done. Like, I feel like I've followed the call that I had, and I did it. And now it's like, I got friends who when it comes to, when you talk about people, or the topic of looking at end time stuff and all the chaos, or anybody who's even just like right up to speed on all the current events, it's really easy to fall down those rabbit holes. Really easy.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that you get so locked into it. And I got friends who send me, I got Protestant friends who send me all kinds of prophecies of different evangelists, different preachers, different people who claim to know the future. And I generally just kind of shuck it aside, not because I disrespect them because they're not Catholic. That's not it. It's at the end of the day, what am I going to do about it other than what I'm doing, which is pray, do penance, live in a state of grace, right? Like, I mean, really, like, at the end of the day, you could sit there and you can go, oh, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And then what do you win a prize? Do you get to say to your friends, like, I told you I was right? Like, who cares? You're right. Because, yeah. I mean, if it's a nuclear apocalypse, for example, what are you going to do about it? You can't stop them. You can't catch them with a net. Yeah, it's not going to, there's nothing you can do about it. So, and that's not,
it's like, just to add to that, you know, it's sort of like going full prepper. One bullet can take everything that you just invested 20 years of your finances and time into. One bullet can take that away from you.
Totally. Well, and like, it's like Jesus talking about the rich man who built a bigger silo basically to put all of his crops into, and then he ended up dying before he got a chance to enjoy it. And it's true. I mean, the whole prepper mindset, I look at it and go, okay, you know, be reasonably prepared, you know, like, be reasonably prepared. But like, you can't prepare for literally everything. You don't have the resources to do that, for one. Secondly, you don't have, like, nothing lasts forever. So you could buy food and all that kind of stuff. But like, how much food are you going to put away? A year's supply, 2 years supply? If the power grid gets knocked out, guess what? Not only are you going to have, you'll probably go through your food really quickly, you're probably going to get hunted down by a group that's stronger than you to take it from you. You could say, oh, I'm going to build booby traps. I'm going to defend my property with, like, you know, with what? How have you been stockpiling ammunition as much as you have been with food? Are you doing, 20% of my income goes to food and 20% of my income goes to ammunition? You can't. You can't. There is no perfect way. And God basically lets you know you're not going to know the day nor the hour. You're not going to, there's nothing you can do. I mean, yes, you can be reasonably prepared, but what does God want you to do? Well, he wants you to be spiritually prepared. That you can do. That you can do. That
and
you
no
can
one can take it from you.
No.
No.
And that's the thing is that if you look in history, there's probably, well, there's at least how many million died in Soviet Russia? Like Holodomor, what was that? Like 20 million, 15 million? It was an insanely high amount.
Yeah.
How did they die? From famine, from executions, from torture? Okay. Do you not think that those people thought that it was the end of the world? Because it probably seemed like it to them.
Yep.
It probably seemed like it to them. Probably felt hopeless. But I remember there was a story of a church in Russia after the Bolsheviks took over, and it was kind of like a secret clandestine church. People were trying to keep their faith while under the oppression that they were shutting these things down, and the doors flew open, and then basically the military came in, threatened everybody, and said anybody who anybody who doesn't believe or something like that can leave right now, right? And then out they went, and the ones who stayed and they closed the doors, they thought they were going to get martyred right then and there, but they didn't. The military actually stayed and prayed with them. They just didn't want to have. They wanted to root out all the fakes, and so this is the thing that we're going to see, and that's the other thing to prepare yourself for martyrdom. Right? Like, I mean, if you're going to really come down to it, if you're going to get oppressed, if the Antichrist is going to come and do all this kind of stuff, the last thing you need to do is cater to whatever he wants you to do. You need to just stick by the plan and stay with God.
What my oldest son, his middle name, I named him after St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Nice.
I have one thing I've told my kids. Well, I told them the story and just briefly. So St. Maximilian Kolbe was a Catholic priest. During World War II, he's taken to a concentration camp. And a couple of prisoners escaped the camp. And so to punish the prisoners and to warn them not to try this, they randomly chose people for starvation chambers. So the Nazis, the soldiers, the guards there took random people. Well, one of the men that they chose was a family man, a father. And St. Maximilian Kolbe, he stood forward and asked to take his place. And the guard asked him directly, said, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm a Catholic priest." And they thought, "Oh, great. That's great. Let's throw him in the starvation chamber." So he gets thrown in the starvation chamber with a bunch of other prisoners. And while they're in there, starving, locked away, he teaches them each how to die peacefully, to make good with God. And they die one by one. And then St. Maximilian Kolbe is left, and as they're dying, they're driving the guards nuts, singing hymns to God and praising God. And finally, the guards come in and give him a lethal injection that finally kills him. And one thing I always tell my kids, I say, you are always free. St. Maximilian Kolbe proved that you are always free. No matter what's going on around you, you're always free to love and serve God to the very end. And he's a martyr for being a priest, and he also proves that we focus on the end of the lives of martyrs, but when you actually look at the full life of a martyr, they lived a life worthy of a martyr. People don't just suddenly become martyrs, or I shouldn't say that. Like, maybe there's some
have,
but don't just count on that. It's one of those things where you have to prepare daily for that. Like, grow slowly in virtue, practice, like you said, do your daily duty, stay in a state of grace, pray, receive the sacraments. But to become a martyr, it takes a saintly life to have the courage, the supernatural courage to do that. And that's a real gift. And it always, when we pray the Hail Mary, and at the end, of course, we say, to pray for us at the hour of our death.
Mm-hmm.
All of our life is a preparation for that last hour, whether that's the end of the world or just the end of our world. And
Exactly.
that last hour is the final battle before you die. That's
The
where
four
you
last
make your
things.
final stand
Mm-hmm.
or fall. And my grandfather, I was blessed to see him just shortly before he died. He spent years, a couple years with dementia, and it became quite severe by the end. Right before that happened, I remember sitting down and talking to him, and he said to me, and imagine it with a kind of a gentle Canadian Scottish accent. I can't do it. But he said, I've been going to confession a lot more lately. I just want to get everything out there. And then shortly after, he was diagnosed with dementia and all that. And I think that was a real grace, because he prayed the rosary every single day. He wore the scapular. He volunteered from the moment he retired. He volunteered pretty much full time at the hospital, visiting people. Very saintly man. And when I saw him, he received the last rites, and he did struggle a bit right before he died, but then he died very peacefully. And I just saw that, and I was like, that struck me, just as, I don't know, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that is a great example of how to live and prepare for death, whether it's the end of the world or just the end of my world. Yeah.
You were there at the end of his life, you said?
Yeah, I wasn't there. I was there like within half an hour before, because
okay.
I have like 30 odd first cousins plus tons. So we were
That
all
makes it
slowly
more
cycling
difficult.
through.
Yeah.
It was
Only
right
so much
before
room around the
COVID.
bed.
Yeah, right before COVID. So
Have
that
you
was a
ever
blessing.
have you ever been present at somebody's final moment?
No.
I've only once, and wow, it's some people, like my mom is, as a nurse, she's been there for quite a few, and but for myself, I've only been it once, and it was before I came back to the church. But I remember it hit me hard. It hit me hard. It was my mother-in-law, but it was unlike anything I had expected. It was at the end of a long period of suffering from cancer, and the thing that did strike me about it, though, was while it's traumatic to lose a loved one, there was this sense of completion, relief, and peace, and I was really happy to see it as it was. And going back to the thing about what you're, with your grandfather, and what we're here to do, like this is just like a stopping off point, like, I mean,
Yeah.
if you really
This
think about
isn't our home.
eternity, this is a blip, a tiny little blip, and you got a short period of time to do right by it and fix yourself up. And it's not easy. This isn't an easy life. It's not fun. It's not, like, there's a lot of challenges that come with it. Where am I going with this? When it comes to the end, I mean, there are people that will see the very end of it all, the end of time, the end of the apocalypse. The word apocalypse actually means like lifting of the veil or lifting of the cover. Yep. And it's funny because, again, more people are focusing on this, and they want to notice it. I don't think anybody truly wants to be present at the end of the world for all this stuff, but like, everybody's always looking for the signs. And when it comes to like that lifting of the veil, going back to our general topic, I want to bring back, we lost almost all of our viewers. So I want to, the Protestants and the agnostics, come back. It's all good. But this lifting of the veil idea is quite interesting. I don't know if you remember, it was late last year when there was that big thing in Miami with the quote unquote aliens that people saw. Did you hear about this? You heard about this in
I saw some
Miami?
clips and I wasn't sure what to think.
I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I don't believe in aliens. I think they're all probably just demons. But you know, there's people that talk about that one as a lifting of the veil. You had that lady on the plane screaming out about, you know, that guy ain't real. And then just recently, I'm talking like last week, there was another one, but it was like a guy on a plane freaking out at another passenger on the plane. And this time around, he actually got the other people on the plane to see it, and they all started freaking out. So you see video of these things, and all you see is the crown of this, you know, the person that he was accusing of not being, you know, of being an alien or something. You could see it. It didn't look good. It's always funny how these videos, like, you know, it's like we all have these like camera phones that have like the best, like the best definition and all that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, when it comes to, you know, filming important things like that, or like the mall stuff, or even just like video of Cape Middleton, it's really hard to get your cameras to work when you need them to, right? But it's there's a lot going on, and it, like this lifting of the veil thing. One of the things that I was looking for when I was kind of going into this deeper, and probably around 2017, 2018, was this idea that all secrets will be revealed, and all the evildoers will be exposed for what they are. And for there's a bit of that going on. I don't know. Like, I mean, we got this P. Diddy thing going on. We got we got a little bit of the Epstein stuff from before. It doesn't feel like enough yet, but again, who am I to judge? That's up to God when those things all come to light. But I wanted to kind of touch on this topic too, from a grander sense of, I talk about how I'm at peace. Like, I feel safe here. Like, you know, like if my power goes out like every week. So it's like a good practice for when the big one comes, when the power goes out and doesn't come back on. Most of my neighbors still cook with like firewood. And, you know, I have this feeling that, like, you know, that's when the social capital you try to build up will be, you know, the most useful, is when all those things that you have grown accustomed to, the internet, your TV, your phone, your computer, your air conditioning, all those kind of things, you're going to know, you're going to know how tough you really are when you can see what you can withstand. And I've read stories about this where, like, for example, in some Eastern European countries where the power went out and it didn't come back on for almost 3 weeks, and chaos ensued. Complete chaos ensued. One of our comments here was Chaco endorsing the Kali Yuga. Yeah, it's like 3 weeks. It's all it took. Just I'm holding it. Lose you. Oh, yeah, I'm back. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
We're back. 3 weeks is all it took. And that's the thing. You can prepare. What do you got? Every medicine you need. You got all the food you need. You got water. You got the ability to get rid of waste from the house. Like, what are you gonna do? And I kind of appreciate that now more. I mean, I've got lots of food. I've got over 1,000 fish. I've got 60 ducks, or I think we have like 55 now because we did some culling. I got 2 pigs. I got some chickens. I got all that kind of stuff. I got crops. I'm growing mandioca. I've got tons of oranges. I've got bananas. I've got my wife's got a wonderful garden. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and that's by design. I mean, you have to learn it all from scratch. I was never taught this stuff. I was never taught this stuff in school, and we were urban kids. And at the end of the day, I can only be so prepared. And you really got to go, okay, you know, when it all goes down, I'm just going to do what I'm doing now, and that's just going to be putting my faith in him to either protect me or take me away. Right. And not get zapped away like in the rapture, but like, I mean, you know, just And the other thing is, like Catholics, we appreciate the merit of suffering. And so if for whatever sake, it all goes down and it turns into hell on earth, okay, that's good, I guess. It means I get some extra penance and suffering before I'm done. And I'm going to do the best that I can. And I'm not going to sell out. It's funny because you mentioned about like Maximilian Kolbe talking about, your freedom, basically. Nobody can take that away from you. And it's funny because so many people we've seen in the last 5 years just handing it over. Like we brought it up the time you were on the show before. You lost your job over this, over the needle of fun. And the thing is that it was always interesting to me because when it was coming out, and I remember I was like, man, they're going to have to get so desperate that they have to come to my house, forcibly restrain me, and forcibly put it into me. And even then, I'd still have faith that God would make it malfunction, or I get the saline, or something will happen, because I'm not going to give my permission. I'm not going to bend the knee. And same talk about like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. This talked about all over the place, and people talk about that, and they talk about Neuralink, and they talk about the jab, and they talk about all those things as like, oh, it might be the mark of the beast, and it's like, or it's a warm up. It's a warm up, and you can decide whether you're going to go along with it or not. And if you went along with it already, like, boy, it's a poor showing on you, to let them do that to you, because in your gut, in your heart, you knew there was some reason to doubt, and you flushed it away because the TV told you not to. The TV told you it was fine. TV told you it was safe and effective. It wasn't. It still isn't. And it's funny because going back to the I want to touch on the Jewish thing. I want to touch on this red heifer thing, because this is coming back up again, and it's happening. I believe I even heard it was either this weekend or it's coming right up around the eclipse. And it's funny because the eclipse. Okay, so timing wise, the eclipse is on April 8th. And a very important member of my family's birthday, and it's on a Monday, right? It's on a Monday, and so it is a week and a day after Easter, and so you got Easter, and then a week after Easter, since Pope John Paul II, we have Divine Mercy Sunday, which has some pretty symbolic relevance to this. Divine mercy being Jesus having a level of mercy that none of us could even come close to. And then the very next day, because in the liturgical calendar, we can't have a feast day inside of Easter, in that week of Easter. So it gets moved. And so the Annunciation, so basically the feast day that it celebrates, the angel coming down and Angel Gabriel talking to Mary and telling her of what was going to be the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And I think again that is April 8th this year, and it's on that day of this eclipse. I've seen lots of astrological stuff, not astrology, but just like astrological significance and relevance. I mean, you've got Virgo, right? And then so in the apocalypse, right, you've got the virgin who's clothed in the sun and has a crown of 12 stars and is standing on the moon and is pregnant. And this year, apparently, I think it's this year, or maybe, I think it's this year, that basically all that kind of aligns in terms of astrology. So Virgo, and then where the crescent moon comes, and then you've got these the 12 stars of I don't want to say, I don't know if Orion, it's happening again, but I'm getting off in the weeds. But what I'm trying to say is that all types of these little signs all over the place are talking about this kind of stuff, and again, it's like, you got to admit that there's this feeling in the air right now that things are really wacky, right? Like things are really wacky.
We're in World War III, arguably, and people have lost their marbles. They can't. So many people can't even say what a woman is. That, like, these are some of the most basic things you learn. Like, this is Sesame Street level stuff that people can't even figure out. That's how insane we've gotten.
Well, wasn't it also, what was it? Was it Sri Lanka? I want to say in like maybe 2016, where there was a bombing of churches on Easter Day, on Easter Sunday. And you had Obama and Hillary Clinton and a few others that could not say the word Christians and instead said, Easter worshipers.
Yeah.
It's just super weird, right? Like, it's just, that kind of stuff is really weird. And, my name is Joel. So I've of course read the book of Joel, or Prophet Joel, many times. I actually find it, I love that book in the Bible. It's apocalyptic and it touches on eschatology, but it's also beautiful and has some wonderful bits to it there. But even in that one, it talked about like blood moons and eclipses.
Yeah, there's one coming up, I think, too.
Yeah.
Or a double blood moon or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. All right. So going back to this Jewish thing.
And God did say that, the stars, the sun, the moon, they're 4 signs of the times, like they're there to tell us more than just the time of day and season.
And I could get into it, but I won't for now. Significance of stars, what they actually are. But it is interesting that, like, through millennia, so through we are looking at the same stars that our ancestors did, that even Jesus did, and that they're there, and we as a civilization have mapped them out, tried to figure them out, tried to understand them. It led the 3 magi towards Jesus because of just reading the stars. Not to be, you don't want to do it for, should I buy a lottery ticket type stuff, but I mean, it is interesting. It is interesting. I mean, the bridge thing yesterday, I mean, the stars and the moon, they make a big difference. I mean, you can't deny like tides. And so with the attack yesterday, oh, sorry, did I call it an attack? I mean, the accident yesterday with the boat crashing into the bridge, the incident, the atrocity, just happened to happen on a full moon when the tides are all wonky at their maximum, and hitting it right on the button there, with the lights going on and off a couple times before it happened. People know about this. A lot of people predict things, or not predict things, but map their actions based on the stars and where they are. And I find this all fascinating, because the thing is that, I've done the rabbit hole. I've read many of the Catholic prophecies about this. We bring up about Mary Julie Jeheni, the way she talks about what's going to happen to France. I've got my eyes on France big time. And then at the same time, Father Kramer, what he talked about, so what preceded that lines around the block confession line thing was also an atrocity against Iran. And so, so Russia, Iran. So we got Russia tied with Fatima, very much so. You've got Spain tied with Garabandal. You got France tied with Mary Julie Jeheni. Yeah. And it's just like... and
they're all powder kegs at the same moment of time right now.
Well, what's France doing? France is entering the war. France is sending in troops into
Meanwhile, they have a foreign invasion that's already there, waiting.
Yeah, and like, talking about a powder keg too. I mean, it's just on a personal or social level. Are you familiar with what's going on with Candace Owens? Are you familiar with
Christ is King?
Yeah, I got Jesus is King hat on right now, in solidarity with with Candace Owens, who's not Catholic. Anyways, the it's interesting because right before this, she was also going off on a big thing about Brigitte Macron. Have you been following that at all? Or yeah, so Brigitte Macron, and that one's an interesting one. She was going to stake her whole career on it. Big Mike, who was swinging the hammer in that opening video I had there, and you know, you get this whole thing like. There's always a cover-up story. There's always something else, like the distractions, like, you know, so this bridge thing happened. Meanwhile, you had P. Diddy fleeing, but is he fleeing? Were they raiding his house to catch him and get evidence or to destroy evidence? You know, you got Epstein, who, you know, he was convicted. We don't have any of his clients. We don't know any of his clients. We don't know any of those, like none of them are in prison or anything like that. And so you get this feeling because like the elites love to cover up their tracks or at least, or just get away with it. They also love that. They just love being caught red-handed and getting away with it.
And fully gaslighting everyone.
Right. But yeah, going back to this, this heifer thing. So we know that the first temple was built by Solomon, King Solomon. And then what happened? Well, the Jews were chastised and they were brought into the Babylonian captivity, and the temple was destroyed. And then they built a second temple under Herod. And then that's the temple that Jesus preached in and threw the money changers around, and then he prophesied that the temple would be destroyed and be rebuilt, and that he was talking about himself, but it also was destroyed
40 years after he started his public ministry,
which is in the Talmud, because in the Talmud it talks about they did that. You know, you've heard about a scapegoat, so they do the prayers at the beginning. I think it's the beginning. I want to say Yom Kippur. If I'm wrong, I'm not Jewish, so I don't know for certain. But as I understand it, that it was there's a Kol Nidre prayer that's done at the beginning of Yom Kippur, which alleviates them of any penalty or any obligation to contracts or promises that were made, and then put all their sins onto a goat, and then tie a thread around the goat, and then send it off, and then it either it comes back or I don't know the details of it, but what I do know is that the thread changed color, so it would go from scarlet red to white, and that was the symbol of God forgiving their sins. And in the Talmud, it explicitly states that stopped working 40 years before the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And 40 years before that, somebody burst onto the scene in their public ministry of Jesus Christ, who was rejected by them. And so are you familiar with the attempt to rebuild the third temple that took place?
I've heard rumors of it for a long time, but it sounds like they're getting much more serious about it.
So they're trying to do it again, but there was another attempt like hundreds of years ago. I want to say it was after Constantine. One of the successors was Julian the Apostate. Are you familiar with Julian the Apostate?
Yeah.
So basically, he made a deal with the so-called Pharisee class to rebuild the third temple, and he was like, "Yeah, sure," because he was anti-Christian at the time. So he's like, "Yeah, I'll make it happen." So he gets the right specialists to come in and build it for him, and they broke ground on this to build the third temple. And just as they were doing that, flames shot out of the ground, killing like all the workers that were around it, and killed like other bystanders, and they weren't able to do it. So what makes them think they'll be able to do it now? Is it because you got a cow? Because you got a red cow? Like, I guess so. They're going to try, but I don't think it's going to do anything other than piss off the Muslims that see it as a threat towards the Dome of the Rock, which Hamas explicitly listed as one of the reasons for their October 7th attack, because they had caught wind of it. It was in their testimony on that. So yeah, things are getting real interesting. They're getting real interesting real quick. And I'd be interested in hearing other people's takes on this. Cause I mean, again, you know, you got all these different prophecies from different people. If it doesn't come true, you weren't a prophet to begin with. That's the way I look at it, right? Unless you're, I guess, Jonah, but not everybody's Jonah, because not everything is avoided, you know, because even in Catholics, we have, what is it, Father Michel Rodrigue, who keeps getting peddled out all the time. And he was wrong. He was wrong about the death of Pope Benedict the 16th. So
yeah.
okay,
Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of people who are either, I don't know, you kind of have to wait to see their fruits and not invest everything in it. You know, it's a difference between the ordinary means of salvation and the extraordinary means of salvation, right? Like if we live in extraordinary times, it may require extraordinary graces and measures, but only trust in the ordinary as far as you can, because that's the only thing you know for sure.
Right.
So like these prophets, you know, I've heard lots of different prophecies coming out. There's that Divine Mercy mission in the States.
Maria Divine Mercy.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, I listened to some of them and I'm like, okay, I mean, we'll see. Like, I'm not going to invest or change what I think God's calling me to do, which basically is pretty simple. Take care of my family and try and lead them to heaven. That's
all I got. You know, that's all I got. When I prayed on it, when I made my decision to come down here, I prayed on it and I was like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? You want me to write a book? You want me to make a documentary? You want me to do another podcast again? By the way, this podcast is not a result of that. I'm not even going to pretend, but no, I prayed on it, and very, very, very clearly just came my son's face, and the message was keep him safe, right? Just keep him safe. Now, I don't know what that means. I didn't know what that means. Like, what does that mean? You know, keep him safe. Safe from what? Safe in general? Like, I mean, what? Like, make sure he doesn't like scrape his knee? I don't know. What does that mean? Well, the next day when I'm doing my readings to that day, and it just happens to be the flight into Egypt from Joseph, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. All right, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I brought that up with you before, and before I moved from Calgary, we were talking about it, and each of us had our kind of a different calling for this kind of stuff. So, you know, I remember I was really concerned about that. I was like, okay, am I going to get seen as like a coward for getting the hell out? You know, like, is that what I'm going to be? What is that? Is that what I'm doing? But I was like, no, it's in my blood. I mean, my great grandparents, you know, they got the heck out of Dodge from the Ukraine. And you know, once the Bolsheviks were taking over, they were like, oh, we're out, time to go. And you know, so some people stayed and some people fled, and some people fought and some people lived to fight another day. And that's the way I kind of have to look at it in general, is that there's not, again, it's out of your hands. You got to go with the flow, do what you can, get right with God. And you know, again, if I see all these signs, if Maria Divine Mercy is right, what does that change? It changes nothing. Padre Pio was a believer in the 3 days of darkness, allegedly. That's in question. Some people question.
Yeah, I've heard mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
But it's one of those things. Yeah, like, I mean, if I start changing, like, the devil has the rule anything but God.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm so worried about the end of the world that I forget my daily duty and to stay in a state of grace to pray, he's already won. I think I'm preparing for something, but what am I actually preparing for? You know?
Well, and I saw a tweet from an atheist who was like, you know, why is it that atheists are never possessed by demons? Right? Like, why are they never possessed by demons? Why is it always Christians that are possessed by demons, and somebody else is like, because they don't have to possess you. you're already going there. Like it's so funny because going back to that, like the things that people hold on to, the vices, the sins that they hold on to. It's always funny when you catch somebody on one of those things, and they could be the nicest, sweetest person, and you call them out on something. And it's not even like you like call them out. It's more like, have you? Yeah, this is going
They
well,
go
but
full Bilbo Baggins on you.
exactly. So it's true. Like people get really offended very easily when you call them out on something, and you can tell what is the sin that's holding them in place. Flawed Man of God, welcome. Good to see you here, buddy. You went on his show not that long ago. How did that go?
Oh, went awesome.
Yeah. I enjoyed taking that one in. I listened to the whole thing. You guys went for like a good 3 hours or something on that one, eh?
Oh yeah. Well, you know me. I don't stop till someone stops me usually. So
well, so it's on this topic. I mean, are there more signs that you're seeing that are there more signs that you're seeing that have you perked on your alarm bells or anything like that are going on? I'm talking natural and supernatural.
So for years I've just had a general sense just in my gut, and I know a lot of people who have that same sense. There's a lot of people, moving out of populated areas and stuff like that. I think there's something there. So whether this is the end or one of the most perfect types of the end, there's something there, because we talked about the other chastisements. Those are actually types of the end of the world.
Absolutely.
In a way, God warns us through history of what's to come, just like everything in the Old Testament prefigures Jesus Christ. There's also there's lots of warnings and prophecies from popes from the early 20th century, and also throughout the 19th century.
Hang on. So I know about Leo the 13th.
Yeah.
And the 100 years reign of Satan, but what are some of the other earlier 20th century?
Well, I believe it was Pope Pius XII who talked about the dangers and the suicide of altering the faith and the liturgy in the church.
Oof.
And that was in relation to Our Lady of Fatima and the secret of Fatima.
Just for reference, by the way, Pope Pius XII was the Pope for the majority of World War II. And at Fatima, Our Lady predicted that a great war would break out during the reign of Pope Pius XI, who wasn't the Pope then. There wasn't a Pius XI. And so when people kind of, oftentimes people get saying that World War II started with the invasion of Poland, but actually, if you look at the plans that were drafted up before that, it actually did start before that, and it did happen during the reign of Pope Pius XI. But I digress. Sorry, I just wanted to give a little history lesson there.
There's also just the times worse than Noah is the one that sticks with me every time I look at what's happening in the world, how insane people have gotten. And the other thing is we live in, for lack of a better way of saying it, in a truly Luciferian satanic society. The sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance are the pillars of secular society. Defrauding the worker of his wages is socialism and communism, and the massive taxes that we have.
Absolutely.
Murder of the innocent with abortion, with the MAID program in Canada, with it's happening all around the world.
Or what's happening in Gaza.
The Christians with Boko Haram, that's happening. The sodomy and homosexuality is promoted as a virtue, as one of the best things in the world, that's celebrated with pride, one of the 7 deadly sins, the deadliest of the 7 sins.
You got the
And
bastardization of the rainbow with 6 colors instead
Yep.
of 7.
claim the rainbow back.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so the sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance, you know, and then of course taking advantage of the widow and the orphan with child trafficking.
Oh yeah.
And MAID is actually part of that in Canada with assisted suicide, right? Like government assisted suicide. It's all these things are pillars of our society. These are the main values our society's fighting for. So what does that say to me? We live in a society in the West that has virtually completely rebelled against God, has gone completely evil. And what does it say about the people during the time of Noah? It says all of their hearts were bent towards evil. And then God repented of creating man.
And Jesus said, woe to those who call good evil and evil good, right?
Yeah.
So
And then those who abuse, like we're also in a society that's heavily infiltrated, I believe, by abusers of children. And I think, you know, our Lord says it's better that you have a millstone tied around your neck and you're thrown into the ocean than to scandalize one of these little ones. So,
well, and why target them? Because they're innocent, because they're pure. You know, it's spitting in the face of God when they do that. It's such an abuse. I mean, especially given the fact that we're all made in the image of God, that to abuse someone who is completely innocent is kind of not kind of, it is the biggest insult you could make, right? So
we live in a world that
infiltrated sounds like Jesuit mischief to me. Yeah,
got to read some Malachi Martin.
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to bring him up. He talked about the 3 days of darkness.
Yeah,
and he talked about he talked about the 3 days of darkness, and he read the Third Secret of Fatima, not the edited half version that we got. He got to see the full thing, and he didn't repeat it all, and he was scared. He was scared to death of the thing. So,
well, on that Art Bell show he was on, and someone called in and asked, they read off a version that sort of was rumored about it. And basically the version had to do with all sorts of calamities, disasters, physical disasters, floods, earthquakes, everything. And he was asked, is that the same as The Secret? And he said, no, it's much worse.
Yeah.
And what could be worse than the physical destruction of the world is the loss of billions of souls for eternity. And that's kind of like, I always remember this, you know, St. John Bosco.
Yeah, that's my
and he had all these dreams that he recorded. But he also had this reflection on eternity. And he said, you know, imagine you've gone to your judgment seat and God's declared, you know, like you died without living in a state of grace. You were attached to sin, and God judged you as going to hell.
Yeah.
And he said, now imagine your first day and you have all of eternity in front of you. Now imagine 100 days into hell. All of eternity is still in front of you. It's still your first day. Yep. Imagine 1,000 years in hell. Still your first day. And he went on like this. And I heard this and it just chilled me to the bone. And
that was what scared my son. Actually, it was similar when we were talking about eternity in that regard. And we were talking about because when I lived in Calgary, we by the Bow River, we were, you know, we would sometimes go down and do a walk to the Bow River. And I said to, you know, I was talking to him about eternity, and I had heard this before. It was like, if you went down to the Bow River and you walked all the way there and you grabbed a pebble and you walked all the way back home and you placed the pebble down, and then you walk back to the river and you grab another pebble and you go back to the first pebble and you put it on there and you stack it, and you keep doing that over and over again until you've stacked all these pebbles into the size of a mountain, and you're still in eternity. It's still nothing. You've been doing that forever. Yeah. And so that's something that,
That's a good image.
yeah, it's like you're still nowhere. It's still over, like it's forever.
Yeah.
And it's chilling, but at the
Well, to
same
think
time, it's
about it in terms of
inspiring.
hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, to think
In
about it in
terms of
terms of
heaven.
hell, it is. But
Yeah.
in terms of heaven, that's completely different. Like I always say, imagine a million years from now, God willing, we're both in heaven,
Mhm.
and we'll just sit around and be like, "Hey, remember that time we did that podcast?"
Yeah,
And
you won't stop bringing it up.
yeah. So, but it's one of those things, like, and if you really want an interesting meditation on what hell is like and what heaven is like, I highly recommend searching Father Ripperger's talk on the 4 last things.
Father
Because
Chad Ripperger.
yeah, and his meditation on hell, I actually listened to it before this talk, so I was trying to refresh my memory on the 4 last
4 last
things,
things.
and
For those who aren't familiar, the 4 last things are death, judgment, hell, heaven, and hell. Correct?
yeah,
Mhm.
and 3 of them will be like, you're going to experience 3 of them.
Mhm.
You're going to experience death, no avoiding that. You're going to experience judgment, no avoiding that.
Mhm.
God willing, it's heaven.
Yeah.
And the way I've heard it described is hell, anything worse that you can imagine, the worst thing you can imagine, it's a million times worse.
Yep.
And heaven, you can't even imagine anything close to how amazing and beautiful and incredible heaven will be like.
Well, and it's funny because I did the I Introductory to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales, and there's those kind of meditations at the beginning of it as well. And when in terms of hell, it's like, imagine the worst smell you've ever smelled in your life, and times that by infinity, and that's what you smell for the rest of eternity. The worst pain you've ever had in your life, magnify that, and for eternity. The worst, scariest things you've ever seen, magnify that for the rest of eternity. The worst sounds you ever heard, worse than reggaeton. You're going to have that for the rest of eternity. Everything. But then what Ripperger says is that out of all those things, the worst part of it is the loss of God, the loss of your connection to God. And it's funny because, again, going back to purgatory, which our separated brethren do not believe in, but that is so purgatory is where you go, you're going to make it to heaven. You once you're in purgatory, you're going to go to heaven, but you have to be purged. Purgatory, you have to be purged of your
Pay every
attachments,
penny, as our Lord said.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to pay to the last penny is paid. So you go through that, and the worst part about that, because in a lot of ways, it's like a hell. It's like a hell, but it's not hell.
Same
It's like,
furnace, but
yeah,
it ends.
it's hot. You're not comfortable. You're suffering, but at the end of it, the biggest part of it that sucks is you have no connection to God for that whole point. And you realize that loss. And there's, people who would, if they were suffering in hell, would just do anything they could just for 1 second with God, just because you realize how important he is. And so when it comes to this, the end of the world stuff, like I've looked into some of these other cults that have arisen, like you've got the Kool-Aid, the Kool-Aid drinkers, you've got the those guys, that what were they called, the Radians or the Relayans or whatever, that all wore the same tracksuits, and the guys castrated themselves, and they all had the same haircut, and they thought they were going to jump onto a moving spaceship that was behind a comet that they had to kill themselves to get onto.
Yeah.
You look at all those things, and there's this human capacity, this human need or want for finality, completion, to be on the right track with these kind of things. And So when it comes to the end of the world, there's that whole thing about, this person just wants to see the world burn. And I get Heaven's Gate. Thank you. Yeah, that was it. Heaven's Gate from Flawed Man of God, the name of the cult. Yeah. And so it's funny because you can see where the desire comes from, but in a lot of those cases, they're terrified. Like they wanted to force God's hand for this. Like, I mean,
they want to be in control of something they're not in control of.
Exactly. And actually, it was funny because this last Sunday was Palm Sunday, but also branches into the Passion of the Gospel of Matthew. And in the Passion of the Gospel of Matthew, that's where we get Judas, where we get Judas trying to return the 30 pieces of silver, and they don't accept it because it's like blood money, but then they kind of figure out a way to, with clever Talmudic accounting, they tried to use that to buy the Potter's Field, which is another shout out to Stu and Flop Man of God when we were watching It's a Wonderful Life. Mr. Potter's development is called Potter's Field. But what's interesting is that that's not what caused Judas to go to hell, right? What caused Judas to go to hell was him hanging himself because he lost his faith in God's mercy. Because, and it's funny because you're reading about St. Peter and his denial of Christ, and he does it 3 times, but it's not even just like he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. It says no. It says he cursed and swore. Like he went deep on it.
Yeah.
But then he ended up being the first pope, and like he ended up dying in a state of grace. He repented. He made right with God over it. But Judas didn't do it, and that was Judas's biggest crime besides betraying Jesus. Was really the thing that damned him was him ending his own life and taking it into his own hands. So it's sad because with the Heaven's Gate people, I mean, that's what you went with. And they got totally manipulated and they were totally brainwashed through the whole thing. But what were they doing? They were seeking. And you just said it yourself before. What does the devil want? Anything but God. So he's going to peel you away to whatever way he can get you, because that's what he wants. And the only reason he wants you, he doesn't want you as part of his army or anything. He just wants to get back at God, right? Like that's all he wants to do is to deprive God of one soul, right? And I think it was it Anne Catherine Emmerich that spoke of basically how there were those seats in heaven that were occupied by all the angels, but then a third of the angels fell. And that basically humanity is, and our souls are designed to basically refill those seats. And that's what our job is. That's what we're here to do, is basically to get into heaven. And and the meaning of life being that you're to know God, love God and serve him. And so that's all you have to do. That's all you have to do.
And that's how basic it actually is. And it's so easy to become distracted. And that's, like all the stuff we're talking about, whether it's prophecy or whether it's real events, all of these are there. Prophecy's there to help us to not be scandalized by the insane things coming down the pipeline. And then the things that are happening are there. Like it's sort of like anyone in your life is either a lesson on what to do or what not to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, these events in history are actually there. Certain people become examples to learn from, to get to heaven, whether you live a life of self-destruction or a life in love of God.
Well, and you need to be discerning. You need to be discerning at all times. Like Kanye, yay. He's gone. He knows how to find his way into the headlines all the time. And he went through a period where he was, I'm a Christian now. I'm and Jesus is King was the name of his album.
Yeah.
And then, but what did he do? he calls himself Yay now. But what was he calling himself like 5-6 years ago? He was calling himself Yeezus. And like that's not cool. And then he what did he do? He made his own church. And then what did he do? He took people literally out to the desert to go to do his services. And that's like right there in the book of Matthew when people say to come out to the desert for him there. He's not there. Yeah. And that's exactly what he did. And lo and behold, I mean, you see this guy, he's talking about morality and family and all this kind of stuff. And then he remarries Bimbo and dresses her up like a porn star in public all the time. He's lost. Like, I mean, it's not lost. I'm not saying I don't get to make that call, but I mean, it's like, he's just drawing all these people. I mean, it shows as a big fraud all the time when you see people acting like this. And
well, there's a huge spiritual vacuum out there. So, and a lot of people don't really know what to believe in. So, if you don't believe in anything, if you believe in nothing, everything. You'll believe in everything. It's again, that spiritual vacuum, which is there because, and this is the other, I mean, we were talking about signs, but it looks like the apostasy is upon us.
May have been for a while now.
For a while. And that's the other thing that's one of the big check boxes.
Yes. We haven't seen the wide scale conversion of the Jews yet. We haven't seen that yet. But also too,
which ones?
The man of sin, the Antichrist, lots of people like to predict who that is. I don't think we have the capacity to know that until it's too late.
Not until you'll know them by their fruits.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's the discernment part.
If even the elect would be deceived, as our Lord warned, if you think you can't be fooled, you're most likely going to be fooled. That's a principle in this. So if you're humble and watching and staying focused on God and trusting in God to know, that's different than being on the lookout and trusting in your own judgment on all these things.
Well, you're supposed to test the spirits, right? You're supposed to basically test them. And if they deny any part of the gospel of Christ, then they're not it. Like that's it. There's your answer. And it's funny because I put into the video that led into this that I'll probably delete when I repost it because it's got copyrighted music. Bluebeam. Have you heard about this? Project Bluebeam. Yeah. So there's a lot of this hologram stuff that you see used for advertising now. I mean, weird advertising on different billboards and stuff like that. And the talk is that, so for those who are unfamiliar, Project Bluebeam is a real operation, basically, that was set up. It was an idea. I forget which organization it was, but the idea was they would project something into the sky to convince the masses of their faith that what they were waiting for was coming. So for you and me, it would be Jesus, or for what the Protestants think about us, it would be Mary. But it's this idea that you're going to get fooled by a hologram. And I posted it because I think that I think that's going to be one of those things where you're going to want to discern all the time. You're going to want to listen. You're like, hang on, that doesn't sound right. And I do this all the time because like there's this show called The Chosen that is quite popular. And I can't watch it. I've tried. I can't watch it. I find it appalling. I find it repellent. And whoa, Chaco, you don't like watching a show about Jesus? I'm like, that's not. It's. You can just tell. When I'm watching it in the beginning, they're like, oh, they made Matthew an autistic guy. They made Peter a secret kind of spy. They made Mary talk about the birth of Jesus in graphic detail that didn't happen that way. You've got just all types of stuff. You got Jesus being nervous about the Sermon on the Mount and getting like pointers from like the apostles. Like,
Yeah.
that's the kind of discerning. When you're watching that, you go, yeah, that's crap. Like, that's just absolute crap. And
Well, and it's also a crisis of saints. People haven't met a lot of people who are incredibly holy.
no.
And so their imagination for what Jesus would be like is very limited.
And I mean, to be fair, it's done by, it's backed by Mormons. And the guy who does it, is he Mormon too, or is he not Mormon? I don't remember the head of the show, the showrunner. Sure. I don't know. It's what's disappointing is the guy who plays Jesus is a Catholic, and he's big involved with that new app that they're flogging. And
did they show which planet Jesus was from in the Chosen?
and his all of his wives. Yeah, it's funny because like we do this all the time when my wife and I are watching something, and you just get that twist. You're like, no, there's something off about this. I don't like it. Go to the early life section to find out who made it, and you're like, oh, I figured so much.
and people are so hungry for something with meat in it, about the faith, that they'll take a couple drops of poison without realizing it.
It's true. And there just isn't anything. But again, then all of a sudden you start to realize, like, hang on, maybe I shouldn't be watching TV so much. Maybe I shouldn't be paying for this streaming service. Maybe I don't want to devote this much attention every night to my screen, the flickering screen. It's funny because Stu, who's watching, I hope right now, as I see, he joined us, me and my buddy Raph, in Lent this year. Even though he's a non-denominational Protestant, he wanted to devote his time to his faith and to get in on the Lent action. So he did some of the fasting.
Yeah.
And so we're doing the fasting. So the fasting is, when it comes to food, traditionally it's 2 small meals that don't add up to 1 meal and a full meal, and that's it. No snacking. And this is our 2nd year of doing it, my wife and I, and it's hard. It's not easy, but we're not going to do it next year. And the reason why we're not going to do it next year is because I realized that, first off, I got proof I can do the fasting. I've reiterated that I've done it twice. Well, I'll have done it twice by this weekend. But I think I need to fast from something different next year. And I think I need to realize that gluttony is not necessarily my vice of choice. I like to eat. I like food, and food is cheap and plentiful here. But that's not my thing that's holding me back. And I think next year the idea is going to be a media fast. Like I might do what Ripperger does and do maybe like 30 minutes in the morning to get caught up on my stuff. I work on the internet, so it's a little trickier.
But it's unnecessary internet use.
I constantly have. I got right in front of me. You can't see this because of the way the camera's speaking. I got my main screen in front of me. I got 2 screens to the side. I got a triple screen array here. I've got, I put whatever I'm working on, like the Word document up here. I've got the research that I'm doing over here. And I've also got like my Signal app open. I've got a WhatsApp tab open. And then over here is just YouTube or BitChute or Odyssey or Rumble or something always going on to keep my attention. And I think that's going to be tougher than the food.
I tried that this year. Much tougher.
And,
I'm not going to claim 100% success.
Yeah, exactly. And the key thing is that you want to detach yourself from your vices, detach yourself from your sins. I'm not saying that watching, the Barn Burner podcast talk about the Flames, the Calgary Flames is necessarily a sin, but I'd like to see that I can do without it. And the problem with Lent too is it's right before the playoffs. So it'll be even tougher. Well, maybe not so tough because the Flames are going to suck next year, but just like this year. But I think that's going to be a nice challenge next year. And again, too, a lot of those kind of things, a lot of those purgations, those kind of sacrifices are practice. They're a warm up because there's, we talked about going to, we'll be in heaven one day talking about this podcast. Yeah, that is the hope. That is the hope. The Irish do this thing where they will do a pilgrimage entirely on their knees to pray and go on their knees for this pilgrimage and a long distance across rocky ground. And they're totally beaten up by the end, but it's for them a practice for purgatory. It's a practice for that denial of your comforts and perseverance to get through it. And I think that's something that's lacking as well. I mean, my power goes up for an hour and a half and I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you live on a farm. Go tend to your animals. Go for a walk. Go pick some fruit. No,
it's
I
like
sit around.
The man who went to Jesus and, asked, what should I do to attain eternal life? And the Lord said, love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul. And he wanted more. And then Jesus says, well, sell all your belongings and come and follow me. And he went away sad.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the guy who went away sad because he's attached to his YouTube video stream, it's just, I don't want to be that guy. So there's good things, like you can do good things with riches, but you can do better things without them, which is completely contrary to the world. And so giving up good things for Lent, like you said, they're good, but they're created goods.
Yes.
They're not God. And so what you're doing is peeling your heart from all these things so that your heart is more free to love God.
Well, and like one of the things that we do with the fasting is every time you get that hunger pang, use it as a reminder to think about God, to pray, right? Like it's a really good reminder over and over again. It's like, I'm hungry. Why am I hungry? Oh, because I'm doing this and I'm doing this for God. And I'm doing this. I'm doing this to work on myself.
And offer it up for sinners, as St. Paul said, for that which is lacking in the cross. It's,
that's a good way to go. Yeah. No, I think that I think, there's a lot of YouTubers, there's a lot of podcasts out there that talk about the end of the world. I think we kind of touched on it somewhat of an original way. We're not talking about prepping. We're not talking about buying tons of rice and putting them in sealed bags or beans or cans of tuna or cans of canned corned beef. No, we're talking about actually preparing yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally for that which is to come, which is going to come, whether you're here on this earthly plane or whether you're in purgatory waiting for when it comes. Either way, you're going to need to prepare yourself. So I think this is a good time to maybe wrap this up for tonight. And
can I throw in a quick joke before we wrap her up?
Yes, please.
So a Jewish guy goes up to his rabbi and says, I have some shocking news. My son, he's become a Christian. And the rabbi looks at him and goes wide-eyed and says, I have shocking news. My son too. He's become a Christian. And they're trying to figure out what they should do and why this happened. And then the rabbi stops and says, wait. Let's pray to God. God will know how to fix this. So they stop and they pray to God. And God actually answers their prayers and says, I have some shocking news.
They know. Got to shut it down now. All right. Well, Mr. Black, always a pleasure. I love catching up with you. This is kind of a great way to catch up with you. And thanks again to everybody who tuned in. And for anybody who lost the feed. I don't know if YouTube kept going the whole time. I guess it did because Stu's here. Try to get over to Rumble. I'm trying to get that going more so because when I did the It's a Wonderful Life stream, YouTube cut me out and Facebook now has bounced me. So I'm down to, I got YouTube, I got Twitch, I got Odyssey, Vaughn, Rumble, and Trovo. So I got all of those as good backups. So if you're not subscribed to any of those things, go over and check them out. The links are in the description. If you want to help the show some more, I'm not doing this for money, but it would always be helpful if others to help mitigate the cost, because StreamYard's not free at all. And some of the stuff comes with a cost. One way to help support the show is go to my Teespring. Grab, we got hats, we got mugs, we got stickers, we got t-shirts. My wife was sporting her t-shirt today. Looks great on her. And yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff helps out the cause. I'm not passing the hat around. I'm just saying, hey, if you want to look good, wear the cool high trust, low context logo, represent it. If people ask you about it, you can point them to the show. They'll never monetize this show. I will never get to that point. So it's not what it's about. But if you have the time, check it out. I would love that if you guys could. And yeah, man, thanks again for coming to the show. This has been another episode of High Trust, Low Context with El Chaco and our very special guest, Mr. Black. Thanks again, everybody. Viva Cristo Rey. Christ is King.
Amen.